Hey guys, what's up? So I was talking to an employee at the building that I work at earlier this morning, and we were talking about the usual things we tend to talk about, namely the stupidity of the country, the fact that, people seem to be losing their damn minds, the usual stuff. And we happened to have ended up discussing things like cultures and religions and our concepts of normal and how they seem to be very, very highly skewed. The stuff we talked about would make for some really interesting videos, I think, and I might end up touching on these topics later on in other ones. Particularly one in particular I really would like to talk about, and I did touch on this already before in older videos, on how the morality that the common people hold to is completely different from the morality of those that pull the strings. And the sooner people understand that, the better. They really need to understand that the rules we go by are not the same rules that they go by. And it's to a shocking degree. Like, the things we would look at and go, I would never do that. Others would be looking at you saying, well, this is necessary. This is what you have to do. So, but that's something else. I'm going on a little bit of a different topic, because it's something that I don't think I touched on before, but it's something that I'm surprised that more people don't pay attention to. I've noticed that when societies pop up and fall, because cultures and societies rise and fall all the time, there comes a point in time when the society reaches a certain peak, or it's beginning to make a downturn, that people start lamenting about moral decay. And, people start, dealing in excesses. They say there's sexual excess, or drunken excess, or straight up debauchery, going straight into hedonism. And I know a lot of people are saying that the same thing is happening with our culture right now. They're like, man, what happened to the good old days? These days it's ridiculous. You see people kissing on the street, and you see sex everywhere and things like that. Now, I'm not going to completely say that's garbage, because I do agree that there seems to be some more, we seem to be escaping more into hedonism these days. So I think part of the reason for that is because the lives we're living, or should I say the lives that are told that we're supposed to live, are so unfulfilling that we're now looking for any type of escape. And these things are ways to escape that. The daily grind of waking up and doing a 9 to 5 just to make somebody else rich, so that you can end up with a wage that gives you just enough to keep a roof over your head, so that you'll have enough sustenance and strength to make it back the next day to continue making the other motherfucker rich. This is called progress. That sort of life is unfulfilling, and you will look for any type of escape. But I think another reason why a lot of this is happening is still because of the rules that society sets up, different cultures or religions set up, which are very unrealistic. I look at religion in particular, and the societies that sprung up from religion. Even secular societies owe a lot of the way they view the world to old religions that they used to adhere to. And I can't help but think about these particular rules and the complaints I've been hearing, particularly about drunkenness and sex and hedonism and things like that. The problem might not just stem from people's weak wills. It could also just stem from the fact that many of the rules that people come up with to control these sort of behaviors are completely unrealistic. And human beings, I know, they tend to fall to a certain constant. If you tell them not to do something, but you don't give them a good reason why they shouldn't, they're going to do it. Hey, don't walk down that street. Why not? And just simply out of plain old curiosity, they're going to walk down that street, whether it's dangerous or not. They at least want to see why it is that they were told not to walk down that street. And if it turns out that there is no freaking reason for them to not walk down it, they're going to keep doing it. Not just because shit, this rule is full of shit, but also because now there's that little sense of taboo of, I'm doing the thing I'm not supposed to do, and getting away with it. We get off on that. It's part of the reason why we root for underdogs all the time. Part of it. The other reason is because deep down inside we hate being oppressed, despite the fact that we claim to put up with it. But it's not just that. It's also that you start putting ridiculous rules on regular urges and drives that we have. Before I go on with that, I just want to say to the people who really think that we've gotten off the deep end with sex, and I will agree that things have gotten a little out of control, but I don't think they're that much out of control like certain people are trying to make it turn out to be. For people who think that we used to live in much more virtuous times, just look up the term Tijuana Bibles on the internet, see what you get, and see what time period these things popped up in. And then reassess your thinking about our so-called norms about, sexual behavior and, what we would deem as decent. Anyway, I'm thinking about, particularly when you come up with religious rules for certain behaviors. You should not do this, you should not do that, you should only do this in certain prescribed ways. But they happen to be the very things that drive us. Unless you happen to have some type of mental imbalance or some type of emotional problem or some type of trauma growing up, sexual urges is a normal thing. So when you live in a society that basically forces you or tells you that you should not act upon those impulses, you're sort of trying to build a dam up against a surging river, and sooner or later that dam's going to break down. And that means the rushing current is going to be a hell of a lot stronger and a lot more out of control than normal, because you didn't find a way to, control these urges in a more positive way. It would have made a lot more sense if, say, religious leaders or moral crusaders, whether secular or not, would, when they're trying to curb the excesses of certain human behaviors, would do it with reasonable guidelines. They would, like for instance, if you want to engage in sexual behavior, at least do it in a way that's not going to harm yourself or the other person. Do it in a way that's not going to bring harm not only to the person physically, but also mentally and emotionally. And so that the next day you won't feel horrible about yourself and the other person won't feel horrible about what you've done. Those seem to be some reasonable fucking guidelines. It allows the person to, act on their urges, but in a way that's going to, benefit themselves and the other person, and no harm is done. But nah, that makes too much sense, which is why you got to set it up in a way that's going to guarantee people acting on their repression later on. I can say the same thing about, drunkenness or engaging in drugs and things like that as well. I'll admit, I used to think that it was kind of ridiculous that human beings are so drawn to, wanting to go into drugs or wanting to go into alcohol or wanting, to feel that high. Me personally, I don't drink, I don't do drugs, I don't do any of the type of stuff because I'm somebody who wants to keep my perception clear at all times. But that's just me. And I wouldn't want to force my particular, ethics on somebody else to live. This is my life and you live the way you want to live. But I have to admit, I never really understood it. It's like, why the hell would you want to be drunk? Why the hell would you want to take some type of chemical substance and, kind of be mentally messed up? But I forgot. Every last one of us, even us straight-laced folk, every now and then like to be a bit off balance. Otherwise, we wouldn't go on rides like roller coasters. We wouldn't go on those teacup rides in Disneyland that spin us around all the time and makes us all dizzy and crazy. Think about when you were a kid and you used to just spin around in a circle just for that sensation of dizziness. Every now and then we like feeling a little out of control. And later on when I found out that human beings aren't the only creatures that dive into this sort of thing, taking hallucinogenic substances and suddenly just getting the buzz. I mean, think about your cat and catnip. They love that stuff. Can't get enough of it. They will hunt it down if they know where it is in the house. But it's not just that. I mean, you look in nature. I remember I was watching a documentary months ago on all the different chemical substances that animals in the wild will actively seek out and take. From mushrooms to certain types of fermented bark, birds going after old fermented berries just for the drunk sensation. Apparently it's something we like doing. So the thing is, with all these so-called taboo behaviors or taboo things we're doing, there seems to be some deep down drive to seek these things out. Some people would say, oh, that's just the evil in you. Well, if you're not doing any harm with it, if you're not hurting other people, and you're doing it, in a balanced way, what the fuck is the problem? And this is coming from somebody who doesn't do that stuff. Again, I don't do drugs, I don't drink, I'm as straight-laced as possible. I barely even take aspirin, which drives my wife crazy sometimes when I'm having a headache. But I don't see any reason why people can't take this stuff in a balanced way. Why can't society and certain moral people or religion come up with rules and guidelines that dictate how you can engage in these behaviors in a balanced way? Same thing with sex. Why can't you, come up with guidelines that have people engaging in this rather natural activity in a way that's balanced and fair and, going to be, not going to be harmful for anybody involved? Because when you do come up with guidelines that restrict people in these ways, they're going to act on it one way or another. And usually when they're acting on it because of being repressed and being denied doing it, they're going to end up doing it in a way that's even stronger and more detrimental than they would have if you had just left them alone. I think this is part of the reason why we're now living in such a hyper-sexualized or, a so-called hyper-hedonistic culture, which, to be honest, I think is a bit overblown. I don't think we're any more over-hedonistic than we used to be in other time periods in history. There are times when it kind of rises and there are times when it kind of goes down, but I know the times when it really starts getting out of control is when it's done in rebellion to certain rules and guidelines that were given to those people. And later on when they find out those guidelines just don't stick, or later on when they just realize they just can't follow those guidelines anymore, they're just like, fuck it, let's do whatever the hell we want. But I think if they were just given, if they were, following something that was a lot more balanced, you wouldn't be having these so-called surges of excess. But then again, I'm speaking as if the people who came up with these guidelines actually cared about the well-being of the people they were coming up with these rules for. A lot of them just simply came up with these rules simply because of control. Anyway, just some mental rambling. A lot of what I said, I'm pretty sure, probably didn't make much sense, so whatever. Feel free to make fun of me in the comments. Catch you guys later.